First of all, what a boring title for an assembly. Put stuff where it belongs. I need to mention that this is normally, first of all, let me start my clock here. This is normally a 4-hour presentation. Okay. But
Coach Dawson, can I say something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, I'm taking a big risk letting him up here speak. It was one of the things that I thought that in the summertime I was never going to see happen, but we've let him do it, so I'm glad he cut it down from 4 hours.
yeah, well. Mr. Hubick, with great risk comes great reward.
I hope that's true, Mr. Dawson.
One of my mottos. So anyway, normally a 4-hour presentation. When I found out, I had 20 minutes, my original plan was just to cut a lot of it out. And then I saw Richard Geary speak on Friday. And he inspired me. So I'm going to give the whole thing. If you do the math, it means I have to speak at 12 times my normal rate of speech. But I've been practicing, so here it goes. Just kidding. I'd probably have to go to the hospital if I talked for as fast as he did for as long as he did. Okay, so this idea for this assembly came to me a couple months ago. The first time I saw one of those really cool new blue recycling bins that are all over campus, that on one side there's trash, and on the other side there's single stream recycling. And I had never seen one on campus, and I went and looked at it, and I peeked my head in, and I saw that in the, something I do pretty frequently, I saw that in the trash side, on the left-hand side, were some bottles and cans that should have been recycled, and on the recycling side, there were some wrappers and food and stuff that can't be recycled, and it really bummed me out. And then the next morning, I went to work out here at Gilman, and I was greeted by sort of the same scene that I've seen 3 times a week for the last 9 years, which is weights on all the bars, dumbbells and weights all over the floor. You have to spend like 10 minutes cleaning up before you can even start working out. I started thinking about how that connected to the trash thing, and it occurred to me that we as a community could do a better job of putting things where they belong. And this is, let me say up front, this is not me lecturing you Gilman boys on being irresponsible. This is a community thing. In fact, when it comes to certain things like recycling or turning the lights off when you leave a room, the adults in this auditorium tend to be a lot worse offenders than the kids sometimes. So this is for everyone in here, me probably most of all. So what follows is my attempt to explain what the problems are, how to address the problems, what we can do, and more importantly, and I think interestingly, why we should do these things. And it turns out that there are several layers of answers to the why question. So a couple goals, things I'd like for you to do. There's going to be a lot of really practical, concrete stuff in here, like kindergarten kind of stuff. And I hope you'll take at least one of those ideas away from the assembly and maybe use it later today in the lunchroom or if you're in the weight room or something like that. And I'd also like you to, there's going to be a lot of sort of moral, ethical, existential questions. And it'd be nice if you could take one of those out of the assembly today and think about it later. So let me just show you some pictures. When I got the idea for the assembly, I started just taking out my cell phone occasionally and taking pictures. This is in the second floor men's restroom. Obviously, there's a big plastic bottle in the trash, which should be in the recycling bin. And this is a trash can in my classroom one day. There was paper in it, which should be recycled. And then the next day, there were bottles in it and glass and that kind of stuff. This is a recycling bin that has paper in it, but it also has a used tissue, which is not recyclable, and like orange peels, which aren't recyclable. This is an interesting one. This is a urinal from the Lumen Center. And it's hard to see, but there are candy wrappers, bits and pieces of candy wrappers in it. And I noticed them as I was using the restroom, and so when I was through, I very discreetly took out a camera and snapped a picture. You have to be really careful about that. It's coming. The payoff is at the end. This is that same picture of the weight room. What's interesting here is that there are weights on almost every bar, and there's weights thrown about the floor. This is like the next day. Literally every bar on that half of the gym has weights on it that people left there. Here's, you know, you can't get the weights out because the bigger ones are on top of the smaller ones, and they're all that kind of stuff. So, what can we do to address these problems? I'm going to sort of fly through the recycling part of this, and if you're really interested in it, I'll send out a link to where all this information is. But you can recycle cans, aluminum, books, bottles, plastic bottles, glass bottles, cardboard and paperboard, cartons, etc., mail, metal, paper. You all know most of this. Things you can't recycle: carry-out or deli food containers, cat litter, shocking, chemicals, cookware, etc. Two I'd like to point out: you can't recycle plastic bags in the single-stream recycling. They use these certain machines in Baltimore to sort the recycling, and the bags get in there and clog it up and break the machines. So you can't throw plastic bags, whether those are grocery bags or the wrappers to your candy. You can't put those in the recycling. You can, however, take them to any grocery store in Baltimore and they'll recycle them for you. Or better yet, you can get one of those reusable bags and just sort of cut the plastic bags out entirely. The next thing is pizza boxes. You'll notice that on every pizza box there are the little recycling symbol, and a clean, plain pizza box is recyclable. But if it has grease and cheese and stuff on it, it's not. They use this slurry process to recycle paper and cardboard, and the grease gets in there and messes things up, and you can ruin a whole sort of batch of recycling with that. So if you have a pizza box and it's dirty, what you can do is you can like rip if the top part of it's clean, you can take that off and recycle it and then throw away the dirty part. I have a little video here because I've been told that 21st century learners need like interactive media. I made this video myself. It's pretty fascinating. Okay, this is in the cafeteria. There's some rice on the table where I was sitting, and I used my napkin to wipe it on my plate so that when I get up, the rice isn't there anymore. And then I go and put my plates away. Pretty radical stuff. Okay. Let's talk about racking weights in the weight room. You should never leave your weights on the bar. You should never leave the dumbbells lying around. You shouldn't leave weights on the floor. When you do rack your weights, there's a very specific and simple way to do it. Top to bottom. You put the smallest, lightest weights on the top and the largest, heaviest weights on the bottom, and they fit that way. Same thing with the dumbbells from left to right. Here's an example. Isn't that nice? And symmetrical, well, not symmetrical, but there's something aesthetically pleasing about the way weights look when they're racked properly. Now, this is one of those little trees, you got 5, 10, 25 on one side and 35s and 45s on the other, and the 2.5s and their little home underneath. Now, I think the more interesting part of this assembly is why. Why should we clean up after ourselves? I'll start with sort of the concrete. I don't have time to elaborate on any of these, but it's really interesting. It would be nice maybe if we had an assembly to sort of get into this. Environmental club sometime, maybe. Here they are really quickly. Recycling prevents resource destruction. That's the most obvious. If you recycle things, you don't have to mine new things from the earth or cut things down. Recycling prevents pollution. Getting natural resources and producing things with natural resources causes a lot more pollution than recycling. Recycling saves energy, recycling saves money. Landfills and incinerators hurt the economy, landfills and incinerators hurt the environment. Recycling creates jobs, One-way use, using things and then throwing them away, is not sustainable. One-way use is unjust. And then the 10th one is not really a reason to recycle. It's just we need to do more than just recycle. If 10 reasons are too many, I have a very simple 2 reasons that will suffice. I like to think about it this way. The world's population is rapidly expanding, right? We hit 7 billion a couple years ago. In 1800, there were only 1 billion people on the earth, so like 200 years ago. And the world's resources, clean water, trees, minerals, petroleum, are shrinking at a very rapid rate. I'm going to show you something that will just blow your mind really quick. This is the world population clock. Okay? That's how fast the planet is growing at this very moment. Right? Isn't that pretty crazy? This is, you can see how many people are being born every second, how many people are dying. Here's something that's depressing. You can also go to, see if I can find it. They've got other data here. How about the environment? So this is how quickly we're losing a hectare of forest. And I don't know what a hectare is. I guess it's like a big acre, lot, maybe 100 acres or 1,000 acres. I don't know. It's a lot. Soil erosion, the deserts are spreading, CO2 emissions, that kind of stuff. It just makes sense, right? If there are more and more of us and less of the stuff we need, if we don't find ways to reuse and recycle and find renewable energy sources, eventually we're just going to run out in the not too distant future, which would be bad. Okay. Why should you rack your weights? So that other people don't have to do it for you, right? The next person who uses that bar is going to have to clean it off. Some of you might know, some of you might not, that I bench press about 500 pounds. So on days that I max out, that's 5 45-pound plates on each side. Now, if I don't put those weights away when I'm through, it means the next poor guy that walks in has to spend like 10 minutes putting all of that tremendous weight on the racks, which isn't fair. Why should he have to do that? And if I throw the plates on the ground, he might trip over them and hurt himself. And why should that happen? I should just clean up after myself. Well, I'm going to talk about the urinal thing again, but in a serious way. You know, when I saw that, the first thing I thought of is, well, later today, someone who works here, one of the men or women that works on our custodial staff, is going to have to reach in with their hand and take that trash out. Right? And why should someone else have to do that? What if that were your job, and you had to stick your hand in a urinal to take trash that someone else threw in there? What if that were your mom's job? You know, what would you say to the knucklehead who threw that stuff in there, and now she has to clean it up? I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, taking this sort of another step further, I was teaching Letter from Birmingham Jail a month ago, and I came across a section from the 4th paragraph that really jumped out at me. And this is Dr. King. It's 1963. He's in a jail in Birmingham because he was arrested for leading a nonviolent protest. And while he was in jail, 8 white clergymen published a letter in the Birmingham newspaper saying that King's actions were unwise and untimely, and that he shouldn't be doing what he was doing. So, Letter from a Birmingham Jail was his response to these people to defend what he was doing. So, here's what I read. It said, I'm in Birmingham because injustice is here. I'm cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. That's one of my favorite sentences in all of literature. And if King is right, and I think he is, then what that means is that everything we do affects someone else. All of our actions affect other people. And when you put that in your conscious mind, you realize that every time you do something, you have a choice. Am I going to do something that benefits other people or that hurts other people? And when you don't clean up after yourself, you're hurting other people directly, which isn't, I think, something really any of us in here want to do. Now, another sort of thinker and philosopher that has really influenced me is David Foster Wallace. And when we don't clean up after ourselves, not only are we hurting someone else, but we're exhibiting a type of thinking that's kind of problematic. And I'm going to read a short excerpt from a commencement address he gave at Kenyon College that talks about this kind of thinking. And this is pretty short. So he starts by telling this story. He says, there are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" The immediate point of the fish story is that the most obvious, ubiquitous, important realities are often the ones that are the hardest to see and talk about. Continue, this is picking up later in the speech. A huge percentage of the stuff that I tend to be automatically certain of is, it turns out, totally wrong and diluted. Here's one example of the utter wrongness of something I tend to be automatically sure of. Everything in my own immediate existence supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid, and important person in existence. He goes on to say, think about it. There's no experience you've had that you are not at the absolute center of. You experience the world through you, just as the fishes swim through water and don't recognize the water, just like we don't recognize sometimes that we're not the center of the universe, but we're not. He says later, 20 years after my own graduation, I have come to gradually understand that the liberal arts cliche about teaching you how to think is actually shorthand for a much deeper, more serious idea. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. And I submit that this is what the real value of your liberal arts education is supposed to be about. How to keep from going through your comfortable, prosperous, respectable adult life dead, unconscious, a slave to your head and to your natural default setting of being uniquely, completely, imperial, alone, day in and day out. Finally, he says, on one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick, however, is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. It's about simple awareness, awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water, this is water. Now I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to skip Thoreau. He's got a great quote about this too. 1 minute. I'll end with a story that's pretty popular at Gilman. And I don't know who brought it to Gilman or who first told it. I've heard it attributed to Reddy Finney. I first heard it from Tim Holly, and it's always stuck with me since then. I think about it almost every day. And the story is that there's 3 types of citizens in the world. First, second, and third class. Third class citizens go around throwing trash on the ground and leaving it there. Second class citizens, they don't litter, but they also don't pick up any trash when they see it. First class citizens, not only do they not litter, but when they see someone else's trash, they pick it up and they walk it to a trash can or a recycling bin. Now, the beauty of this story to me is twofold. First, it makes it really hard once you've heard it to walk past trash and not pick it up. But second, it's about a lot more than just trash, right? It's really about 3 different ways of living. Third class citizens leave the world a little worse off than they found it, right? They hurt people and they break things. Second class citizens don't make an impact one way or the other. They just sort of slide by and no one notices. First class citizens make the world a better place than they found it. They help people. They build things. Now, in conclusion, sort of the reality is that we're all three types of citizens all the time. And that most of us, definitely, I can speak for myself here, most of us are second-class citizens the vast majority of the time. But what I hope you get out of your education here at Gilman is the awareness that living in your default mode of thinking you're the center of the universe and living as a second-class citizen, just to be aware of that, right? And to strive for more than that, to strive to operate at a level that's not your default setting, to strive to be a first-class citizen. That's what really your education is all about. If you leave here and you can do those things, then all the time and effort you've put in has been worth it. And if you leave here and you can't do these things, you just operate on cruise control all the time, then it's been a waste, really. So my hope is that you'll go out, you'll put stuff where they belong, you'll clean up after yourself, you'll be aware of the interconnectedness of all things, you'll be aware that you're not the center of the universe, and you'll strive to be a first-class citizen. Thank you very much.